Welcome to the Umpqua Unitarian Universalist Congregation, where we can be ourselves without being by ourselves. I'm Glennis Peterson, and I want to remind you that I rang the chime 3 times, once for everyone who came before us, once for those of us who are here and now, and again for those in the future. I wish to thank our greeters, Al and Mary Herring. Also would like you to please check out the insert in your order of service. It lists upcoming events, but on the back of it, you'll see that we also have Soup Sunday starting April 7th. I want to gently remind you to turn off your phone if you haven't done it already. And one more thing before we go into the fish collection, I would like to remind you that if you haven't done so already, check that box in the back with the table with the red cloth on it for your pledge packet. Okay. So to help those in our community who suffer from food insecurity, we join with several Roseburg churches in support of the fish program. We will now collect your food or money donations for fish. While I'm doing so, let me tell you that we do have some young ones with us today, and Sharon will go downstairs with them, but we need one other person to volunteer to do that, because we can't just have one person. So be thinking about it. If you can help, let us know. Thank you, Connie, for those beautiful flowers. You're coming up. Welcome now to all of you at home. We're so glad you can join us. I want to thank, by the way, very much Jake Tranter in the back, Sean Shea, who helps us with the music, and Genevieve in the office. We don't know what we'd do without you. Today, our speaker is Reverend Stephen Landale. After serving as a hospice chaplain for 11 years, Reverend Landale is now Social Services Manager, there's a difference, at Lumina Hospice in Corvallis, supervising social workers, a chaplain, and other staff. He is thrilled with his new job. He lives in Eugene, listens to podcasts on his commute, enjoys keeping in touch with old friends and family, hiking, bicycling, and simple things with his family, and recently finished binge-watching Ted Lasso with his wife. We do have a couple more announcements. If Lillian would come on up.
Good morning. This was left out of your announcements page. I want to remind you it's happening today at 2. Lisa and Aria, if you do not remember, have been here 2 years prior to COVID. This is their first return. They are on a worldwide tour. Remember their harp music, their beautiful rare instruments, and all the interesting conversations in between. So please try not to miss this. And it is a fundraiser, of course, for us. Two.
The other thing that's happening here is the beginning of our pledge drive. And I fought my way to be the first person to tell you all the reasons why this is so important. Okay, I know that the money we need pays for staff and speakers and the building. I mean, we've corrected major things about this building this year, so we can go on in it. But what really is important to me is what happens for me here. At UUU, I can sing out my beliefs and values and intentions every Sunday. It's a place I can come to where I find others on my path in their own way. UC challenges my thinking and challenges me to challenge me. This is a place where I have searched for the wholeness I believed was mine and found it, hence the red boots. We share our stories openly. It keeps me exploring the possibilities of heart, love, as opposed to violence. Here I reach into my best self and reach out to your best selves. Let's see where that takes us. So please think of what you get here and what you can bring here. But remember, the money is for the building and the people. And if we don't have those things, we don't get to come here. Got it? Right. Intelligence is one thing we all share, right? Right. Got it. Okay. Carry on.
Thank you, JC. Kathy. We come together this morning to remind one another to rest for a moment on the forming edge of our lives, to resist the headlong tumble into the next moment until we claim for ourselves awareness and gratitude. Taking the time to look into one another's faces, and we see their communion, the reflection of our own eyes. This house of laughter and silence, memory and hope, is hallowed by our presence together. Turn to 440 in your hymnals for our opening words. It is a responsive reading. Okay. From the fragmented world of our everyday lives, we gather together in search of wholeness. Yet we know that no branch is utterly severed from the tree of life that sustains us all. We would hold fast to all of good we inherit, even as we would leave behind us the outworn and the false. We would escape from bondage to the ideas of our own day and from the delusions of our own fancy. Let us labor in hope for the dawning of a new day without hatred, violence, and injustice. In this spirit we gather. In this spirit we pray. Please rise in body or spirit and join us in singing number 360, Here We Have Gathered.
Come and step inside.
And we don't get to do this every week, but if we do have a second person that can go downstairs with Sharon and the children, we will sing them downstairs. Any takers? There we go. So, let us sing. Please remain seated, and we'll invite them downstairs. Now we've come to the time in our service when we remember our joys and concerns with silent or spoken candle lighting regarding the significant milestones in our lives. I invite those who wish to light a candle, silent or spoken, that we take each Sunday isn't just a stale habit, it's an opportunity to recommit to this place and to this people. Our offering is an affirmation, a yes. When we give, we say yes to something we value. With our gifts freely given, may we say yes to the values of our faith. May our offering help us practice Unitarian Universalism within and beyond our congregation as tools to empower our mission. Thank you. We are truly grateful for these gifts and are committed to using these gifts to make a difference in our beloved community and our world. From you I receive, to you I give, together we share, and from this we live. I receive, to you I give, together we share, and from this we live. And please settle in your seats for our meditation.
Good to be with you all again. This morning I'd like to share a guided breathing meditation that I shared with you previously, may have even been last visit. It's by Thich Nhat Hanh. I invite you to adopt the body posture that works for you. You might want to uncross your legs and arms, take a deep breath. You might want to close your eyes or keep your eyes kind of softly open, focusing on something. And hear these words. As I invite you to synchronize your breathing with these words as I breathe in and out, as you breathe in and out. First for yourself, breathing in, may I be. Breathing out, calm. Breathing in, may I be. Breathing out, healthy. May I be fearless. May I be peace. I invite you to repeat that sequence. Calm, healthy, fearless, peace. To yourself a moment. Now I invite you to draw to mind someone you've been carrying in your heart. Could be living or dead, have passed on. Could be human or a non-human animal. Could be someone you knew closely, intimately, or someone you knew of, even far off. So hold that person in your intentions in your heart, and while breathing in, say, may you be, and breathing out, calm. May you be healthy. May you be fearless. May you be peace. And finally, I invite you just to note how you feel in this moment. Note how your body feels from head to toe. And remember this moment, because it's yours to recreate when you wish. Blessed be, amen.
Today's anthem is a prayer. A prayer for healing, a prayer for forgiveness, a prayer of an expression of sorrow and grief for the pain and separation that we see around us in the world, and for the violence that touches all of our hearts. What can I do, my brother, to respond to the madness? What can I say, my sister, to ease the pain? How can I help to heal a world that's so torn to pieces? Give me the strength and compassion, Lord, to give your love today. Give me the strength and compassion, Lord, to give your love today. When I take a look around, I see the world turned upside down. I see brothers being brutal to their brothers. Where is the love that we should have for one another? Now I hope and pray that we may see a brighter day, and may our children grow up free of fear and hatred, and help create a world where all of life is sacred. What can I do, my brother, to respond to the madness? What can I say, my sister, to ease the pain? How can I help to heal the world that's so torn to pieces? Give me the strength and compassion, Lord, to give your love today. Give me the strength and compassion, Lord, to give your love today. In a world torn apart, if we can keep a tender heart and see each other with forgiveness and compassion, from our loving hearts will spring forth loving action. Now with hope and trust, that of God in all of us, let's offer a helping hand to serve a higher purpose. We'll find that our lives are filled with peace through loving service. What can I do, my brother, to respond to the madness? What can I say, my sister, to ease the pain? How can I help to heal the world that's so torn to pieces? Give me the strength and compassion, Lord, to give your love today. Give me the strength and compassion, Lord, to give your love today. Give me the strength and compassion, Lord, to give your love today.
Thank you, Sean. You know, as people age, I've seen through my work, I can speak a little louder. Is this okay? The volume good now? Thank you. That's better. Thank you. I have to say there's part of me, after hearing Sean's song, hearing you sing along, I felt like we'd reached the moment, and there's part of me that just wanted to say, let's all go home. No, I'm quite serious, so thank you, Sean. Thank you for that. There's a lot of heart here. Every individual I've had the pleasure of speaking with and seeing and hearing, the way Kathy invited us all to honor the unspoken joys and sorrows, the way each of you speak and present yourselves. There's just so much heart here. And there's so much heart kind of collected and still reverberating around this space. So I invite you to think about that. I didn't know you were having a pledge time here, but that's what I'd like to say. And I find the word sanctuary to be very accurate, a good word for this place. It's multi-use, but it's a place where healing can and does happen, among other many wonderful things. And earlier, I want to correct something. I said that with regard to the meditation, we can recreate it. That's not quite accurate. We can invite an experience, we can do things that improve the odds on it. But you might try that meditation and get nothing. And if you have the false belief that you can recreate an experience whenever you want, you'll beat yourself up and get more depressed. And I think this kind of leading into grief, this is what happens sometimes. And depression, why can't I pick myself up like I did before? Why can't I? So we can invite experiences, but I want to say that the odds of all those things happening can be a lot higher in a shared community, in a sanctuary like this. So thank you for building and protecting and nurturing this space. So shared, I started a new job recently, just 3.5 weeks ago. Feels like 6 weeks, I was telling Heather. When I interviewed, I was surprised by one question that I'm pretty sure was not scripted in advance. The medical director asked me, will you miss working directly with patients and families as a chaplain? Because now I'm mainly supervising others. That was a great question. I got off the hook a little bit because I said, well, I understand I'll have a small caseload here. So I won't be giving it up entirely. And I also said that I anticipate towards the end of my career working past 65, and I might return to being a chaplain, even part-time then. But he did highlight something that really came true in the following weeks. I was grieving much more strongly than I thought I would as I made my last visits with patients and families. I had left hospices twice earlier, the first time from the same hospice when I came to Eugene, and so this was the third time I'd left a hospice, and this was harder. And I think it was because I was grieving this as a daily work. And little things that came along with it. I've started teaching myself guitar in June, brought my guitar to visits, so I'm not practicing and playing guitar as much. I'm not singing as often either. But there's so many layers, and sometimes I couldn't say goodbye because I was visiting people in memory care, and it would cause, for some, undue stress and not be helpful. So there's all kinds of losses that we grieve, all kinds of changes. Sometimes we choose them, as I am now, the positive thing, but has some necessary losses. Sometimes we move. Sometimes we choose a new relationship and we're so happy, but then we realize we're grieving the time alone or something like that. There's so many losses that we have, and so many that we don't choose. Most painful and difficult are often the passings of those we love. So I'll be focusing on that, but there's so many others. So some words about grief. First, grief is not just feeling sad. It's not even all about the feelings. There's many feelings, and there's many other aspects to grief. A good definition I read years ago when I was working as a hospice bereavement coordinator is that grief is all that we experience internally after the loss of a loved one or other loss. And I'm replaying this from memory, and I don't know who said it. It was in a pamphlet, but it's very close. All that we experience internally after the loss of a loved one or other loss. And there's so many losses. I want to say losses of animal companions count, losses of jobs, careers, the little losses that can come with aging, mobility, abilities, manual dexterity, so now we can't maybe knit or do some of our hobbies or play the guitar or something like that. Losing vision or hearing and all that comes with that, which can be quite a bit, including a sense of feeling connected to others if we can't see or hear as well. So we have to find new ways. But even if we do our best, there's still some loss there. And something that's not often talked about is the loss of sense of contribution and meaning that comes. I've observed in memory care and some particularly, there's a lot of emphasis on keeping people busy and happy, which is good, but there's not as much sense of contribution. And I would love it if they would take the legal risk of allowing people to load a dishwasher, and unload a dishwasher and sweep. I mean, simple things like that. And part of my hospice work has been to remind people, help people refocus their sense of meaning currently. And often that involves modeling going through a difficult and perhaps last stage for family. And I offer that to you, that actually something I've said to some people that's come as quite a surprise is this might be the most important year for you as a parent. You know, somebody who's 86 and dying. And this comes to me true. My dad's last year was probably his most important year for me. In my dad's last year, he reached out and did things that I would say cut in half my negativity towards him and doubled my positive, and I'm able to carry forward his legacy in positive ways now because of how he conducted himself in his last year, his openness and facing it. We have a choice when we're getting towards the end. We can push people away or welcome their help. This has generational influence. If we can allow people the privilege of caring for us at the end and overcoming our maybe shame or embarrassment about various changes, and let people care and connect with them. I'm telling you, a lot of professional and personal experience. It's a rich time. There may be no more rich time to influence our families. And we live in a culture where death and dying isn't dealt with well. And the young people growing up today will probably have a ratio of 10,000 violent, strange deaths they witness on various screens and games and movies to one kind of real, might say healthy death. So we have an opportunity to work against that a little bit. I'm going mainly from notes today. There's going to be a few digressions, and hopefully we leave before 2 o'clock, but no, I won't go that long. So back to some of these basics. Grief is not just the feelings. I'm going to list some other feelings that can come with grief. Many of you know them from especially Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's work. But anger, resentment can come with grief. We who work in healthcare know that those feelings can be targeted at us, sometimes for good reason, often for not. Guilt can come, and guilt often follows relief, can be a feeling in grieving, and that can be hard to acknowledge. You're caring for somebody a long time, you love them, you miss them, all that's real. And then there's some days you feel relieved because you get to go to the store or for a drive or do something and not have to make special arrangements if you were even able to. So relief is a feeling, and it's often one of the harder ones for people to accept. And so it comes with guilt. In my grief support groups I've led, we've talked about that a lot. Sadness is there, but there's also something that might be the opposite of all these things, which is emptiness or depression, flatness. And this gets tricky because that's a normal part of the grieving process, but it can also become clinical depression. So that's one of the things we've got to watch out for and get some guidance for, seek counseling sometimes. Where's that line? Something I've seen in grief support groups that's been puzzling. In fact, one thing I said and really found to be true is that I've never met somebody in a grief support group who wasn't really puzzled by at least one aspect of their grieving experience. Like even if they've been through it a few times. One thing that can be puzzling, there's a clinical term called grief bursts. Grief bursts. You think you're doing pretty well, it's been many months. It's not like to say you're over it, but you're kind of functioning more. And all of a sudden, you just fall apart. Sometimes it's triggered by a specific place, memory, smell, anything. Sometimes you don't even know what it is. And it's like you're back to day 2 or hour 1 when you first learned the news. So this happens, and it can be so helpful to be in a group with others who say, oh yeah, I had one of those too. Highly recommend it. So those are some of the feelings. There's so many changes also that come with grief, and sometimes is particularly when we lose a spouse or somebody really close. The adjusting to the other changes means we have to put our feelings of grief aside for a while. It's called shelved grief, or if we're going through lots of things. I was going through a divorce when my mother died, and I had to kind of shelve my feelings about my mother for a while. And by the way, it's a great metaphor, shelving grief. What happens to food when you have it on the shelf too long? It gets kind of nasty and stinky, right? You can do it for a while, but not forever. Same thing with grief. It's okay for a while, but it starts to become kind of toxic after time. But I think sometimes people don't think about this, particularly if you've been married a long time or a partner for a long time. There can be division of labor, and all of a sudden you're the one who's paying the taxes. I mean, I met people who haven't paid taxes in 60 years or ever. High school sweethearts got married and they divided things early, especially that generation. That's common. And you're learning things. And then that can be resentful. Why did you leave me to do this? Sometimes people feel that. But also just overwhelmed with all of a sudden having to learn new skills and figure out problems. Can I afford to live here anymore? Do I have to move? And so there's so many things that can come with a loss, and some of those get in the way of the internal grieving process. But I think if you know anybody who's through a loss, just don't say much. Like, just take in and be there for them, at least to start, because there's so many different things that could be going on. It can happen all in the same hour, too, or same day, or go through cycles. Complex grief. So hospice bereavement coordinators and other clinicians often identify complex grief. I'm just listing some of the factors here. Grief is considered complex when the loss was unexpected, sudden, tragic circumstances, or if it was even if it's expected, if it was turned out to be particularly painful. In hospice, we see sometimes people have terminal agitation or pain, and it's hard for the hospice team. We're doing everything we can. The person wants to be comfortable, and it can't always be achieved. Grief can be complex when there were a lot of unresolved hurts in the relationship. In fact, often grief that tends to go on in difficult ways longer is with people maybe we didn't have as strong a relationship with. And so we're grieving, for instance, what we didn't have with a person. That's a loss. The hope that something would be different. But also we can have guilt that we didn't maybe do enough to mend ways, or anger that we tried to mend ways and they wouldn't accept it, or they didn't reach out. So you all know this. Do what you can while you can. On the other end, on the hospice end, don't wait till the last. You got some relationships that need some healing. Doesn't mean you go and, how you approach it depends on your relationship, the other person, feel things out. But don't put it off. Do what you can. Grief can also be complicated when there's a high level of dependence on the person who passed. Again, it's complicated because we have to learn all these skills, or financially dependent, emotionally dependent. This can come into place with animals, too. Grief can be complicated when, and this is harder to identify, especially when it goes on for years, when we're losing an identity or role as well as the person. I've been their caregiver for 12 years. You didn't wish they were ill. You wished your relationship could have been normal, whatever that is. It was really hard to care for that person for a long time, day in, day out. But when they pass, it's like, well, who am I now? What do I do? What's my purpose? And that's complicated because people think like it's just complicated. It's hard. We lose that. And people might feel selfish for grieving that. That's something about my role. Grief is complicated when they're past unresolved losses, especially traumas or otherwise unresolved. And there's more categories, and I would say from all these things, you may be concluding the same thing I am. Most grief is complicated grief, Really, there are some, and I don't know, maybe it's a third of the people I meet with their grandparents, great parents who are, lived a good life, and everybody was ready, and there was no complications at the end, and that does happen. It's more than 10% maybe that I see in hospice. But by definition, I'm not getting all of the sudden deaths that see either. But I would say majority time are some complications. Many of you know Kubler-Ross, another really useful book is William Bridges wrote Transitions and other books, and you can find things on his website. He identified the 5 disses. I hope I've got this right. Disengage, this is when we're grieving. It can be as we're approaching an end, so this can be getting ready to move, getting ready to leave a job, getting ready to end a relationship. It can be afterwards. Disengagement, dismantling, disorientation, disidentification with a person or a role, and disillusionment. Very easy. I see this particularly with jobs. It's easy when you're getting ready to leave. It's like you start being disillusioned. It's easier to leave when you start to see the bad side of it, and disillusionment, it's easy. That's why people can be rude to each other at ends of relationships too. It's easier if you just become disillusioned and say, it wasn't good anyway. But I want to focus on one aspect, disorientation, particularly when our life, this language is fascinating. We say, my life revolved around her or him. Okay, so let's take that metaphor. That's like a planetary, or the moon revolves around the earth. You take the earth away, what happens to the moon? Spinning off into space until eventually it will revolve around something else or crash into something. I mean, but really, that's a great metaphor. So when we lose the person our life has been revolving around, we feel like the moon going off into space, disoriented. Our lives need to be, it's very hard to live day to day if our lives aren't anchored in some ways. All of us have that. Even if we're young and going through a lot of change, the anchoring can be, I'm growing and changing and learning. I've got my family here and I'm exploring new things. That's a kind of anchor, right? Identity associated with the stage of life, perhaps. But when we lose someone, we can become very disoriented. I think that's important to just recognize. There's and regarding books too, I want to say, we have some books in the back that you can see, not the ones I'm referencing, but Modern Loss, Death with Dignity, Lifelines, Great Occasions. Check out, you've got a great bookstore back here. Mental aspects of grief. People often think grief is all about feeling, sort of many feelings besides sadness. There's also just totally different dimensions. And some of these you can maybe link to those 5 disses. For instance, the summary of the mental aspects of grief are kind of memory, concentration, cognition, memory, word recall. It's normal for people who are grieving just having a hard time talking. You can't, remember certain words, which happens to us all at times, but happens more. Grief brain is another term I've heard. Grief brain. We're in grief brain. Somebody said fog brain earlier. We can have grief brain. Decision making. Good to avoid major decisions if you can. And concentration. Fractured attention span. So when I was grieving once, I realized that I could listen to people really well for about 10 minutes. It was like a timer went off. And then I was back to processing my situation, the grief. And it turned out I was more working as a bereavement coordinator and chaplain. Most of my work was phone calls. It tended to be about 10 minutes or less, sometimes longer. So it worked out, actually. But it was very hard for me to do what I'd done, sit and listen to somebody for 40 minutes. Listening takes concentration and work. So forgive yourself. If you're going through grief, it's not that you don't care for other people as much. It's your mind is disrupted. You're disoriented. And so you literally can't concentrate as well. It normalizes these things. It's helpful. Physical aspects of grief. Fatigue, Most people tend to sleep more, but you can be of disrupted sleep and not be tired all day. Nap during the day, be up all night. I mean, most people, I think, experience some disruptions in sleep, at least for a time. And sleep does all kinds of things to you. Weakened immunity, I think partly as a result of that sleep change, but I think even if you're sleeping okay, most people grieving are more susceptible to colds and flus and things like that. Loss of appetite, or increased appetite, or changed appetite. Everything's changing. Depression-like symptoms. When I went through a clinical depression, I had reduced peripheral vision. I haven't heard about this much, but really, I literally had more tunnel vision. And definitely seen animals grieve. We lost a cat and a dog this year, and our cat ate less for a while and seemed a little more disoriented and started doing something she never did before, which is sleep in the dog's bed. She wanted to smell her and be with her. Previously, I had a cat who, after the dog died, she was kind of rude to the dog. He didn't eat for 2 or 3 days, much at all. And you wouldn't have known he really cared about the dog, but he did. Another aspect of grief that I don't hear talked about is, I learned this from a great book. It won the Pulitzer Prize in, I think, 2001. It's called A General Theory of Love. It's not about grieving. It's called General Theory of Love. It was written by, I think, 3 or 4 neuroscientists from the San Francisco area. And one of the things they demonstrated well in the book is that human beings living in close proximity regulate one another physically, medically. Like, we have this idea that because we have skin, we're completely separate. We're not. And so one common example is women living under the same roof, their menses will often line up. And they say it's not just psychological. There's something going on physiologically. So when someone loses a partner and says, I feel like I've lost my other half, or I've lost a limb, these neuroscientists are saying, you kind of did. Your body doesn't know how to regulate itself, like circular symptoms. Maybe it has to do with electrical fields, and I don't know, and I can't describe it all, and it takes time for our bodies to learn to function. This isn't just feelings or mental, this is physical, particularly with people who had been living together, or animals. You have a pet. It's maybe, got a pet in your bed every night. You're regulating one another. That does change over time. It gradually diminishes, but man, it hurts at the beginning. And there's, that's hard. I don't know why this is, but I think at least dealing with the psychological portion of that, teddy bears, really, do what kids do. Look to what children do, stuffies, things like that can actually help. Obviously, it's not a biological regulation, but it tricks our mind and it helps. So moving through grief is also like peeling layers of an onion. We may think we're mostly through it, or at least on a kind of plateau when we get this grief burst or something. I'll share a personal story that's also about the importance of expressing ourselves in different ways. So in grief support groups, one of the things we'll often do is give writing exercises. One writing exercise. One day I had somebody else facilitate. I was co-facilitator, so I was more like a participant. Happened to be some months after my mom died. I had the shelved grief. And so I did a writing exercise, filling in the blank. Now that you're gone, I no longer blank. You can think about this, but it's different writing. Our brains, our hearts work differently writing. Same with art or other things, music, different ways, connecting. And what I found myself writing was, I'd been telling people the hardest part of my mom's passing was she won't get to see my kids growing up and they won't know her more. And it almost became rote. I didn't say it with no feeling, but it was true, but I wasn't really processing the grief when I said it. But in this exercise, I recalled something, a specific instance of this. I said, now that you're gone, I will no longer see my daughter Belle on the phone, my phone, talking with you. My mom lived in Denver. I could hear, there was a couple calls, I could hear my mother's voice coming through the phone. There was laughter. My mom was getting to know my adopted daughter. They were connecting. And when I wrote this out, I cried. It's like, okay, let's just forget about the co-facilitator thing. You're on. I'm a participant now. But I really believe I would not have recalled that memory without the exercise. And if somebody came to me and said, here's $10,000, and I'm going to take that memory from you, I'd say, no, thank you. And I could use $10,000. You know, so that's gold to me now. But I had to go through an exercise, crying, and now it's a cherished memory. And I realize, although I am grieving the fact that we won't have more, I have some good memories. There may be 2 or 3 ones. Also, my daughter played checkers with my mom when we finally visited. So I got those. That's what Grief Works about, my summary of that. Wow, we are getting a little long here. Not 2 o'clock, but we're going a little long. I want to say, for grief, give yourself permission. It's a great phrase I learned from another chaplain. Give yourself permission. What can that look like? I met one lady who just kept her husband's clothes in the closet a lot longer than people thought. She liked to smell him before she went to sleep. She hugged his clothes sometimes and said goodnight. And she was still functioning. She did something other people don't do. I've met several people who talk aloud to their loved ones. In fact, one lady, she was a bookkeeper for her husband's business. It was kind of, I think it was a hardware store, something like that. Mostly male customers. The product wasn't something she really cared for, but he did. She took a couple days off and kept the business going 7 years after he passed. And I said, how did you do that? And she said, simple, he helped me. She talked to him all the time. She knew, we can say, was it psychological? And she knew what he would say because they've been together so long, or was there actually something spiritual going on? I'm not going to say. But he got her through it. Give yourself permission. There's no right way or wrong way. And once in a while, the people who are saying, okay, it's been too long with the clothes, you need to get rid of them, once in a while they're right? Sometimes it's well-tended, but usually, often people giving advice like that are uncomfortable with your grief, and it's easier for them if you're not grieving in the way you're grieving. Forgive them for it, but find the people who can handle your grief. It may shift for a while, and really forgive the people whose own unresolved grief keeps them from being there for you. Do that exercise for them, but then spend more time with other people for a while. Another story I just need to share. We often hear that children can do magical thinking. Parents divorce, kids think it's their fault, or think if done something, right? Somebody dies, the kid thinks it's their fault. So guess what? We're still kids, kind of. We carry that inside of us. Anything that kid thinks or believes is still in us, too. And I'll give you an example. So actually, the same lady who was hugging her husband's clothes and things, she was talking about her husband. After months and months, she finally revealed that her daughter died in an auto accident in her mid-20s, I think. And she still felt horrible because her daughter, she adored her daughter. Her daughter had beautiful long hair. The day of or the day before the accident, daughter cut her hair short. And as she was getting ready to head out, mother says to daughter, "Oh, honey, why did you have to cut your beautiful long hair?" And daughter, and it was teasing, it was loving. I don't think daughter was genuinely upset. but it was just saying, I loved your hair so much. And daughter knows mom's going to come to love my short hair too. But literally, half a century later, this is what she's now finally starting to talk about in grief support group, because daughter died in an auto accident, like within an hour of that. So magical thinking isn't for kids. There's some part of her that connects her daughter's death with her saying, oh, honey, why did you have to cut your beautiful hair? So she shares the story again and again in the support group, and myself and others are saying, but your daughter knew she loved, yes. When she broke it down and talked about it, she knew she didn't cause it. She also knew that her daughter wasn't going away feeling unloved by her mom. It was actually an expression of love, this particular attachment to it. And, as we're coming up to Easter, this reminds me of stories that are told from Christian scriptures. Peter denying Jesus 3 times, right? I do not know him. And then grief support groups are a great lens to look at the post-resurrection stories of the Gospels, okay? A lot of what happens there I've seen in groups. For instance, Peter experiences Jesus coming to him and saying, Peter, do you love me? Yes, Lord, you know I love you. Peter, do you love me? Yes, Lord, I know that you love me. And then it emphasizes in Gospel Mark, Jesus says again, a 3rd time, Peter, do you love me? And Peter's like, oh, this is about me denying you 3 times. Yes, Lord, I love you. Some emotionally clueless biblical scholars have said this is Jesus' way of sort of reinstating Peter. I look at this grief. This is Peter has to go through it 3 times to really understand, to forgive himself. And I know this is true, I think, because I experienced it in a grief support group. She had to say it aloud a few times. Oh, she knew I loved her. She knew I loved her. She knew I loved her. Peter had to say, yes, I loved you, Lord. Yes, I love you. Same thing, I think. And it took her half a century to get there. So she was living a good life, but let's not wait that long if we can find a way. I think I'm going to wrap up here. There's more I want to share, but we can also talk later. I just want to conclude with another thought. Something that's not as helpful for people generally, and all these rules have exceptions, but is saying, God has a plan for you or something. That's often about covering up people's feelings. I will say again, depending on people's relationships and religious beliefs, that can be helpful. 95% of the time it isn't. And the question, everything happens for a reason. There's a great book, by the way, called Everything Happens for a Reason and Other Lies I've Loved, written by a minister who has cancer and may have passed by now. She's like, oh, really? God's purposely taking my 5-year-old child's mother away? I don't think so. But I will say that while things don't necessarily happen for a reason, the reason those statements exist is because they carry some truth in them. And I think of it this way. Everything bad that happens can be an opportunity for greater compassion. I lost 2 brothers tragically. I don't believe God caused that so I'd become a minister. However, if they hadn't died, I probably wouldn't be speaking to you right now or been a hospice chaplain. So those deaths became opportunities for me to understand a dimension of human being and to develop my own compassion and desire to, work in this work that I do, become a minister. So losses have a way of stripping us down to something essential, painful, difficult, but there is that opportunity. A little like Leonard Cohen once said in an interview, there's a crack in everything, that's how the light gets through. So when we're pretty cracked up, it sucks, it hurts. Let's not try to make it, but there are opportunities there. So that's, I think, the thought I want to close with for you. And along those lines, we'll be singing. Oh, actually, I haven't, sorry. Yes, singing For All That Is Our Life, number 128. Oh, we were going to do a discussion. Should we just do that afterwards now? Sure. Sorry, we went a little long. So we're going to sing For All That Is Our Life, maybe just the first verse. Okay. That's 2 minutes. We can do it all.
For all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift which we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days light. For needs which others serve, for services we give, for work and its rewards, for hours of rest and love, we come with praise and thanks. For all that is our life, for sorrow we must bear, for failures, pain and loss, for each new thing we learn, for fearful hours that pass, we come with praise and thanks. For all that is our life, for all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift which we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days light.
Look to this day, for it is life, the very, very life of life. In its brief course lie all the verities and realities of your existence, the bliss of growth, the glory of action, the splendor of beauty. For yesterday is but a dream, and tomorrow is only a vision. But today, well lived, makes every yesterday a dream of happiness, and every tomorrow a vision of hope. Look well, therefore, to this day. Join me in singing, Go Lift It Up.